Hello and welcome to yet another edition of New Reads. Here's wishing all my viewers a very happy and prosperous 2021. The book that we are discussing this week is a novel by the much acclaimed Irish-British novelist Maggie O'Farrell, and the book is titled Hamnet. To give a brief description about Maggie O'Farrell, she was born in 1972. She has been writing for the past 2 decades, and some of her novels include her debut novel was After You Had Gone, which was very widely acclaimed, and some of her other novels are The Hand That First Held Mine, Instructions for a Heat Wave, This Must Be the Place. She has also written a very popular memoir, and that is titled I Am. And this chronicles some of the near-death experiences Maggie O'Farrell has gone through in her life, including some of her childhood illnesses, as well as that of the illness of one of her children. She has also worked as a journalist, and she has taught in the University of Warwick. The title Hamnet brings to mind the celebrated play by William Shakespeare that was titled Hamlet. Most of us are familiar with the play Hamlet, where the young prince Hamlet avenges or tries to avenge the death of his father, who has been murdered by his uncle. And he comes to know about this only when the ghost of his dead father appears, as an apparition in the night, and reveals this to him. But at the end, he's unable to take a decision as to what is to be done. I mean, he gets lost in kind of a philosophical quagmire, which ultimately results in a tragedy where a whole lot of people, including Hamlet himself, is dead. William Shakespeare, as we all know, was born in 1564. He was born in a place called Stratford-upon-Avon in Warwickshire, England. It is also known that he married a lady called Anne Hathaway, who was 8 years elder to him. In fact, Shakespeare was only 18 when he got married to Anne Hathaway, who was 26. And subsequently, they had 3 children. The eldest one, Susanna. Then they had twins, which was a boy and a girl. The boy was named Hamnet, and the girl was named Judith. Now in 16th century England, the names Hamnet and Hamlet used to be interchanged. So you could either call or write Hamlet, or you could even call a person Hamnet. So both the names were in vogue then. It is also a matter of record that Hamnet, the son, did not survive for long. He died when he was just 11 years old. And there is, in fact, there is not much reference made about Hamnet in any of the plays or sonnets of Shakespeare. He was sort of deliberately trying to obliterate the memory of his son from any of the works thereafter. But at the end of the day, it is also ironic that he called a play that he wrote around 4 years after his son's death Hamlet. And it's not just that he named it Hamlet, but there are 3 characters in the play who are called Hamlet, which includes the young prince, his father, as well as the ghost. So probably, it's very possible that Shakespeare has sort of transposed his entire grief into that particular work. He may not have made a direct kind of play after his dead son, but at the same time has sort of immortalized him in a way through by giving the title Hamlet to his play. Now, it is easy to surmise that this novel, because it is titled Hamnet, is about Hamnet, or mostly about Hamnet. Of course, there are ample references to the young boy in whatever short life he lived. The way he moves around his home in a very carefree manner, the neighborhood, his relationship with the twin sister Judith, whom he loves so much. In fact, he's like a carefree young child, as any young child in his age can be. But later, sort of gets into a problem as far as his illness is concerned. However, it is Hamnet's mother, Agnes, who sort of really pervades the entire novel. Now, Agnes is again the same Anne Hathaway, who is the wife of William Shakespeare. But she's been called Agnes by the novelist because Agnes, according to Maggie O'Farrell, has been the original name, or rather has been the name which her father has mentioned in his will to her upon his death. So Agnes is the name that Maggie O'Farrell sticks to as whenever he refers to Shakespeare's wife in this novel. So this novel actually is about that lady Agnes, and the author traces Agnes through her life, starting from the mention of her as a young girl, a young carefree girl, living near the woods. She has a bird, a kestrel. She plays with it. She's a very, very carefree girl. And then she finds and meets this young man who is 8 years younger to her, who comes to teach Latin to her half brothers. So her father is no more, and she lives with her half brothers and half sisters and her stepmother, who is not very kind to her. So that is where she meets William Shakespeare, the bard, for the first time. But that time he is no bard, he is no dramatist, he is just a Latin tutor. And they fall in love. And they fall in a kind of extremely passionate love, which results in a marriage. Now again, the marriage is not something that her stepmother Joan takes lightly at all. So she sort of very, very violently revolts against this marriage. And of course, there are some very, very uncomfortable scenes, nasty scenes in the novel about this whole episode. But ultimately, she gets to marry this young Latin tutor and comes to live in his house, that is in Stratford. Now, the uniqueness of this novel is that the name William Shakespeare is not mentioned even once in the entire novel. It's a deliberate attempt on the part of the novelist not to mention Shakespeare's name anywhere, because this novel is not much about Shakespeare at all. Shakespeare became Shakespeare much after in life, and after he moved into London from Stratford, he began to write plays, he began to interact with theatre artists and others, and then of course he became extremely successful, and a lot of people say he was a extremely successful businessman in a way, because he knew how to sell his art. The author wanted to keep this novel about the other characters who form what you call the footnote in history, who never appear on the limelight, but at the same time have a very, very great influence in the writer himself. O'Farrell's narrative is neither linear nor chronological. In fact, she sort of intertwines between two different incidents that have a very major mention in the story. One is the fact that Judith goes down with bubonic plague, the fever, and then Hamnet gets all the more perturbed with it, and the way he goes around the house in a very disturbed fashion, and the way everybody in the family tries to bring the child back to health, the whole issues that sequentially follow, and then after a while, it is Hamnet himself who gets sort of pulled into the whole disease, etc., etc. So these are the things that form one part of the novel. The other part of the novel is the time when the young girl Agnes meets the Latin tutor, and then the kind of romantic affair they have, the kind of life they have once she starts settling in his own home. And then the fact that they raise the kids, and mind you, it is Agnes who raises the kids, because by the time the bard, the tutor, has fallen into a kind of stage where he wants to do something different. He doesn't know what is really tormenting him, but he wants to get away from Stratford and go to London. And he thinks that that is the place where he can prosper, where he can do a whole lot of things. So that is the other stream of the novel, and both these are sort of intertwined throughout the novel. So this novel is a very brilliant narrative of what would be a typical household in those days in the 16th century England. It begins by the fact that Judith is bedridden, and Hamnet, who is in a very frantic mood, goes around the house trying to find out if there is somebody who can help her. So he searches for his mother, his sister, then the grandmother, but finally lands up at his grandfather's room. And grandfather is a glove maker of those days. He was once a very well-known person. He was a bailiff in England, but later he fell into hard times. He was disgraced because he committed some kind of fraud in business, and he's a very, very violent person. And rather, he meets out bad treatment to Hamnet when he goes and tries to seek his help to come and help Judith. So that is one character which is portrayed, and maybe this grandfather, who is also the tutor's or the bard's father himself, his violence, his negativity would have played a part in the young Shakespeare wanting to leave Stratford and go to London. So that is also possible. We also come to know in the novel that the kind of married life they had after all these children were born was not a great one, was not a very cordial one. There were so many issues between them. So that kind of thaw in relationship between the two, between the husband and the wife, is also brought out in this novel. So as I said, you get a very good vivisection of what happened in 16th century England when you read this novel. The way people lived, the way a room is arranged, the way a marketplace is done, the kind of language people used to probably speak. She has tried to be truthful to history. That's what she has said. Whatever information she had, she has not contradicted that. But wherever she did not have enough information, she may have tried to add certain information of herself, or maybe some creative imagination she would have used in those places. All the characters that she portrays are full of life and blood. Be it her ailing son, be it the stepmother, be it her own husband, be it the children in the household, or strangers. All these are brought to life in an extremely nice way. The author has done a lot of research, but at the same time she has not allowed that research to overpower the narrative, which is, I think, one of the reasons for the brilliance of this novel. I should admit that Maggie O'Farrell's Hamnet is one of the best novels I've read in a long time. The way she has portrayed the female protagonist, Agnes, the power that she has given to her, which we find in the initial part of the novel, but at the same time the vulnerability that she sort of brings out in the latter part of the novel, which is also truthful about human life. That character, I think, stands out really, really special in contemporary English literature. I think viewers would remember Shuggie Bain, which is a novel by Douglas Stewart that we reviewed a few weeks earlier. And in that novel, there was equally a very strong character, and her name too was Agnes. there is slight difference between these two, in the sense that that Agnes used to be humiliated by a whole lot of men that came into her life, including her own husband, and she tries her best to come out of that every time, only to finally succumb to the kind of violence that she's exposed to, and the kind of tragic life that she inherits. And at the same time, here we have a protagonist who is extremely playful and powerful, who wields a lot of influence in the household where she is married into. She has a whole lot of influence on her husband, but at the later stage, she sort of loses control over the whole narrative of her life, because she loses her son. She has no control over her husband. Her husband does not want to stay with her. He wants to go and do his own work. And she reluctantly sort of sees him go. Later on, even after Shakespeare, after he makes a lot of money in London, buys her a house in Stratford, and the entire family moves into that palatial building, she cannot forget the fact that her son is not with her. And somehow she is unable to forgive her husband for not being with her at that time. It is only much later that she decides to go to London and see the play that he is doing herself, along with her brother Bartholomew, that she accepts the fact that here is a husband who has been probably living in grief. He has been trying to forget his grief by doing his plays, but he has tried to immortalize their child by giving his name to one of his plays, which is probably, and maybe Shakespeare knew it also, was the best play that he had ever written. So that sort of changes her, and she finally accepts her fate. The author has said that she has tried to be very careful with words, because she didn't want any kind of anachronism to come into the play, be it the use of language, be it the use of some the name of some product, or a thing, or a particular food. So everything she has tried to be as truthful as possible to history, which makes it such a great read, an enthralling book. I think this is one great historical book, if you can call it so, that I have read after reading My Name is Red, written by the Nobel Prize winning Turkish novelist Orhan Pamuk. There is also another element that is very interesting in this novel, and that is the enthralling description of the plague, the bubonic plague, which afflicts initially Judith, but she escapes, and later it afflicts Hamlet. That was a pandemic which affected a whole lot of parts in Europe in the 16th century, and so many lives were lost because of that. And she draws a very vivid picture of how the disease is spread, by flea. It transmitted to human beings, and from one human being to the other, and so on. And finally, it reaches certain households we are familiar with. So, reading Hamnet in these times, brings forth the fact that such a pandemic is not just a part of history. It can even be contemporary, as we all live through it. And two reasons that primarily causes such a pandemic are commerce and travel, as we are seeing it today. Those descriptions of the pandemic are also extremely endearing, for any reader. And mind you, O'Farrell wrote this novel much before the pandemic showed up in parts of the world. Before I conclude, let me read out a small passage from this book. The scene is Hamnet finding out that his twin sister Judith is going through a terrible time. She is bedridden, and he wants to help her. So she has gone out and searched everywhere for his parents and others, and finally, he got hurt when he tried to talk to his grandfather, who is a very violent man, as I said before. So he has come back bleeding, from his forehead to Judith, and that is the scene that is here. Hamnet is running back outside along the street, wiping at his face, dabbing the blood with his sleeve. He lets himself in through his own front door, up the stairs to the upper room where a figure lies in the pallet next to her parents' big curtained bed. The figure is dressed a brown smock, a white bonnet, the strings of which are untied and straggled down her neck, and is lying on top of the sheets. She has kicked off her shoes, which lie inverted like a pair of empty pods beside her. "Judith," the boy says, and touches her hand. "Are you feeling any better?" The girl's lids lift. She stares at her brother for a moment, as if from a great distance, then shuts her eyes again. "I am sleeping," she murmurs. She has the same heart-shaped face as him, the same brow, where the same corn-colored hair grows upwards. The eyes that fix so briefly on his face are the same color, a warm amber flecked with gold. The same set as his own. There is a reason for this. They share a birthday, just as they shared their mother's womb. The boy and the girl are twins, born within minutes of each other. They are as alike as if they had been born in the same call. He closes his fingers about hers, the same nails, the same shaped knuckles, although his are bigger, wider, grimier, and he tries to flatten the thought that hers feels slick and hot. "How are you?" he says. "Better?" She stirs. Her fingers curl into his. Her chin lifts, then dips. There is, the boy sees, a swelling at the base of her throat, and another where her shoulder meets her neck. He stares at them. A pair of quail's eggs under Judith's skin. Pale, ovoid, nestled there as if waiting to hatch. One on her neck, one at the shoulder. She is saying something, her lips parting, her tongue moving inside her mouth. "What did you say?" he asked, bending nearer. "Your face," she is saying. "What happened to your face?" He puts a hand to his brow, feeling the swelling there, the wet of new blood. "Nothing," he says. "It was nothing. Listen," he says more urgently. "I am going to find a physician. I won't be long." She says something else. "Mama?" he repeats. She's coming. She is not far away." Hope you enjoy this passage, and I am sure that you will find the novel also really worth reading. This is all for this week. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a good day.